By the way, we got some furniture in to the new space last night. I checked, I just took a glimpse in there before I came up. Holy crap. If you guys want to like just take a peek soon, it's legit. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. All right, so we've gone over a couple solutions now. Let's go over mine real fast. So first you see I've got my tests, narcissistic number. I have is narcissistic here. So I'm asserting that these are true. These are my test cases that we had in the problem, right? So is narcissistic is a method that takes in a number, integer, and returns a Boolean, right? So we're determining whether or not a number is a narcissistic number, right? So the first thing I'm doing is making a string out of that number. So string that value of number. Then I'm getting an integer number length. So this is the length of the number there. And I also have a sum. I'm starting it off as 0. So we don't have anything yet. So I have a for loop. I'm going to iterate over the list. And I'm going to get the integer value of the current integer in the string. Right? So I'm like, give me the substring that is the current character, and then turn that into an int, and that is an int this number. So I have the current number and I have the length. So all I need to do is add to my sum the value of raising this number to that length and adding that to the sum. And at the end, I have sum return sum equals number. And that'll return me true if they're the same. Right? And I just realized I am not sharing my screen. Yeah, there it is. And just like always, you can access this on the interwebs. As of now.
And this problem with mine, it's like a startup failure.
Okay.
Failure.
Yeah.
Can you look at it?
Sure.
Okay. Here's just something small.
Are you running Postgres? Here's the stack trace. So the top of it says connection to localhost 5432. So you're not running Postgres.
Oh, so I have to have that up every time.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
Well, if you it should
So I
still
restarted my computer. And
yeah,
it didn't work.
if you close it out, it'll still it'll persist in your system tray. But yeah, the stack trace says that it's not connected to Postgres.
Okay.
So that's what happens with that. Yep. Rock on. Well, before we get started, does anyone have any questions about anything that you want to talk about? Any Java curiosities, things that you've encountered that you're not sure about? Okay. So today we're actually going to do something pretty dang awesome. So
What?
is it V8? Nice. All right. Okay, so if we think back to our CRUD repository, it's pretty simplistic, right? We looked at the CRUD repository interface and we saw that it has like find all, and it has save, and I think it has remove is the name of the method. It turns out that the Spring JPA library allows you to be way more expressive about the types of things that you can return. All right. So we're gonna get into that today. So it's kind of filtering and stuff like that. It's pretty slick. I think you guys are gonna be really blown away by it. So what we're gonna do is take a look at our Game Tracker Spring project, first of all. So let's open that up. We worked on yesterday. So our goal here is to basically filter out our result set. We don't want to display all the games. We want to display all the games that match a certain genre, for instance, or that match a certain release year, right? Now, to refresh your memory, what it looks like, I don't know if you guys remember the work we did yesterday. All right, localhost 8080. We have, yeah, stuff. And then genre is adventure, platform is P, Xbox One, release year is 2000. Right, refresh the page, and there you go. Xphone. So, what does your gut tell you from our experiences so far about how we might want to filter out this data?
What do you mean exactly?
Like, what kind of a URL would you want to have to craft to get at this data? First of all, would it be a GET request or a POST request?
Yeah,
Why?
because you want to return the new HTML.
All right.
You want,
So,
you
sorry?
want a URL that stored it, right? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking, so say that this is a list of all of our games, right? We don't want to see all of our games at once. We want the ability, because it's too many. Imagine we have a lot, right? Imagine we want the ability to see a specific kind of game and not just all the games, right?
Maybe a post from a database that stores all of the games?
Well, the data, the games would already be in the database.
Right. And
So
then
we
someone
don't-
would select from those.
Yes. So when we're selecting data and not updating it, that's a GET request, right?
You could use like links, like let's say you like hit a certain genre link and it brings you to that page, and since the data is already stored in that page, it just prints out all the games for that genre.
Yeah.
Page.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So instead of going to a completely separate page, we can reuse the home page, but we can pass in a parameter. Do you remember how to do that with a GET request?
What's request query?
Yes. The query string. So if we craft a query string like this, like a game genre equals adventure, then we can tell our server basically only give us, I mean, optionally, our server can look at that value and do different things based off of that. Right? So
Isn't
these,
it after the question mark?
yes, anything that's after the question mark is a key value pair separated by an equal sign. If I had another thing here, it would be an and sign. So like another thing. The key equals another value. Right? So this is the general format. Correct, exactly. If you're looking at a URL, anything past this question mark is a query string parameter. And the query string parameters in the wild get pretty crazy. Like especially if you're browsing like navigation that's supposed to like filter through things. They usually use the query string for that, and it's nuts.
I remember that from college writing research papers.
With like,
Like in the bibliography when you reference like URLs and
oh yeah, they're super
so
long.
long.
Yeah. Yep. 95% of the time, it's not. I mean, the domains are limited. They're not very long traditionally. It's the query string that gets you super fast or super long. Actually, the longest URL you can have is 255 characters. So it's actually a technical limitation behind that. So it's in your best interest to try and whittle that down a little bit. But in most use cases, it's pretty simple. But what I wanted to do is get you guys thinking critically about like how to approach a problem like this. Like you're retrieving data, you're not posting data. So it would be a GET request. And we could have a page that's like /games. And then if we want to look at a particular kind of game, if we want to filter it, we do like games genre or game genre equals whatever. But just for simplicity's sake, in our Spring app, we'll just keep it on the home page and be like game genre equals whatever. Okay? So right now, notice that this is exactly the same as what we had before because we haven't added any functionality in the back end to do stuff with this parameter we passed in. Right? So right now, the server doesn't care that you passed in a game genre. It's like, so what? All right. Cool. So first things first, let's add a bunch of anchor tags, which will generate, hyperlinks to those URL paths. So the URL path is still just /, which is the home page, and there's just different query string parameters, right? If we go back to home, just above our, what's above the form? Yeah. Rerun our things. And we have all adventure, RPG, strategy, shooter. Now note that when I click these guys, I'm actually navigating to this page. So this is just like you're navigating to a new page, by the way. Like in your history, it's going to show up like that, right? So navigating to a different query string parameter is just like a new page. So, yeah. So, but keep in mind again that we have yet to tie this up to anything, so this is still not doing anything for us. All right. You know what? Actually, let's pull this out and minimize it. All right. So what we need to do next, we have our query string parameter. Let's move on to our repository. What we need to do is craft a query in our repository that only returns to us the games that follow that genre. And what we're going to do right now is take a look at CRUD repository. So there's save, there's find one. You base it off ID. There's exists, there's find all, and count and delete all. So the closest thing we have is find all, and we had to pass it a list of IDs. But we don't know any IDs right now. We had to find by genre. So there's no method here that can help us out. But our repository is where we have all our methods to get all our data. So we need, we're kind of at an impasse. So what we need to do is extend the CRUD repository with our own select methods, okay? So it doesn't have enough. We have specific needs. We're very needy. So we need to add it. And you can do something like this. So you can say that the game repository has a method called find by genre. You pass it a string genre, and it returns me a list of games. So what Hibernate is going to do under the covers there is craft a query that selects games by genre by passing that genre string in with a where clause. So behind the scenes, this SQL is going to say something like this. Select star from games where genre equals whatever you passed in. And it's going to do the job of parsing that result set and then building an array list and sending it back to you. Well, we don't know it's an array list, but it's probably going to be an array list, right? So this query method, so like there's a find all method. It exists on CRUD repositories that looks like this, right? So let's start from games. Find all gets you everything from games. But we don't want everything from games. We want just this. So we want to find all the games where the genre matches the genre. And we can tell Hibernate that we want to do that by specifying just this method, find by genre. That actually Hibernate will look at this method and its method signature and what it returns and figure out how to build a query to give you that data. So it looks at the actual method signature to figure out what to do. It's a pretty cool feature, and you're restricted to a specific like language there, right? Like it's like you have to use specific keywords like find by and then a column name that exists, right? And then you have to pass it the data, right? So let's check it out. We need to update our slash route in our controller to not just blindly get all the games, but to get some games. So list game list. So keep in mind that string genre is nullable. So if it is null, if we don't pass anything in there, then we want to just list all the games. That's the all thing. So there's no query. If there's no query string parameter passed into the current home page, then we're just going to list. We're going to return all of them. Otherwise, if it's not null, we're going to run our find by genre method and then pass in the genre that was passed in to me. And then Hibernate's going to handle the querying of that and return to us a list of games that match that query. Pretty slick. Let's just run it real quick and see what it looks like in action. We have all adventure, RPG, strategy, shooter. It just happens to be that I made both of those adventures, probably because it was the first one. So let's do FFVI. Genre is RPG. Platform is PS4 is the closest that gets to that. Release the year is 1997.
G.
Role-playing game? It's when you pretend that you're somebody else.
Yeah, got that.
Yeah. Or you play a character or whatever. So there's no shooters, there's no strategy games, there's one RPG now, there's an adventure game, and there's all of them. Right? Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So shooter is just like a gun game.
Yeah, you just shoot people.
Shoot people.
So note that genre is not specific. Like, I mean, you picked a genre arbitrarily because that's the problem you wanted to solve. But you could have this same query for any column that you wanted to reason about in Hibernate. So find by release year. For instance, if we wanted to figure out all the games that were made at this year, you do that. And we need to just tie that up with our home page. So we go back to our controller. We can do string genre and string, maybe integer release year. Okay. So this gets a little more complicated. So let's just do an else if right now. So now our homepage accepts a release year parameter, and we're optionally getting different things from our repository based off the value of that parameter. So if I'm like release year equals 2015, doesn't do anything because it didn't capitalize the Y in year probably. Right? Everyone understand what's going on there? We crafted different query methods from Hibernate based off of the data that we wanted to get back. Now, in today's lesson, there is a link. Let's get this farther down. Here. So this kind of shows you the different things you can have here. So we have interface user repository, extends repository. So this is a repository that contains users and is addressed by a long value. So like they have more than 2 billion records in this table. So they needed to use a long, which is kind of actually crazy. So this is a list that says find by email address and last name, and you get email. You give it email address and last name, and it'll give you a list of people that match that criteria. So you can see it constructs a select statement, select you from user U, where your email address is that and the last name is that. So here's a list of like all the different things you can add to your method names. But here's an order by. So for Jennifer and Mike, we did that paging and sorting thing. It's kind of overkill. You could use the same thing with these custom query methods.
The CRUD with the CRUD repository still?
Yeah. You can keep the CRUD repository and not get into the paging and sorting repository interface, because that has a lot of things that you don't even need. Because we weren't even doing paging at the time. If you just wanted to sort the result set, you could do so like that.
Yeah, look at the documentation of the paging and sorting thing. It's pretty cool. Just like extends the CRUD repository and it has a whole bunch of
Yeah. Yep. It actually, because I've written by hand a lot of pagination code. By the way, pagination is like if you have your, like Google search results, there's pagination at the bottom. It's the control that goes between pages. I've written that many times in my career now, and it's always a pain in the butt. So it's because there's a lot of edge cases that you don't take into consideration, and like a lot of query string parameters that you have to like manage and stuff like that. But the paging and sorting repository actually makes it pretty straightforward. That's pretty cool. So yeah, you can make anything here. So it's, I mean, basically anything. Right. So you can find by column starting with and not like, and where the first name is like something, right? Where stuff is null, you can do like where the start date is before, after a certain date, like the current date. So you see it's a really powerful language.
You basically allowed to put anything there.
I mean, if it follows this language, yeah.
So you just put it on column names though.
Yeah, the column names are required, like between these ands and ors and stuff like that. Like it has to work on column names. It'll convert the method signature, like it does the lower camel case naming convention, and it'll find between these keywords, it'll find the column names. Right, and if you specify some of these, you have to like, you have to pass in like the start date or whatever.
So these will return like a list. If you want to return just the single one, you can do like find first by age, list.
Yeah, I think there is a first. There definitely is a way to return 1. Hmm. I think it might be just as simple as not returning a list. Like just
No, I mean, I've done it.
oh, you did.
Yeah.
Oh, so you added the top to the operator.
You say like find first by.
Yeah, it's weird that that's not listed here though.
Yeah, I looked it up somewhere. In fact,
Yeah, that's really strange. But cool. Yeah. Awesome. So we added release here. I'm gonna replace this with this just in case anything's different. So yeah, check it out. There's find by user, you give it a user. Find by release year, you give it an int. Find by genre and release year, you give it a genre and a release year. And find by release year is greater than equal. So int min release year. Pretty cool. Oh yeah, find first by genre. It's in my notes. So instead of a list of games, you return 1 game. You get the first game by the genre. You have count by genre, which you give it a genre, give you a count, the number of things that match that genre. So find by genre, order by name, ask. So order by name ascending based off of the games returned by this query.
Count by genre would count like the number of games in that genre, or?
This one right here?
Yeah.
So in SQL, there is you can select the count, which is the number of rows returned by a query. So this is doing the similar thing. So yeah, you pass in a genre, it gives you the count of all the games. Yeah. So we're gonna add a search feature, right? So let's think about search for a sec. Would searching be a get or a post, do you think?
Search would be a post, and what you get would be a get.
Are we giving this server any data? Like, are we changing anything on the server when we search?
That's it.
You were really good at reading.
It does.
This is not the first time you've been like, well, it says so right beneath. Correct. The answer is it should probably be a GET request, right? Because we're not changing any data. There's data that already exists on the server. We just want to get to it in a different way, right? We're not giving the server any information. We're not modifying any server information. Okay? So we have a form here. You can actually have a form. You can have forms that do GET methods, GET requests also, right? So that was that. Sorry. So you have a form here. The action is the home page, and its method is GET. So if you had to guess, you hit submit, what is this going to do?
Nothing.
Just gonna do nothing. It's a bold guess. What we're gonna do when we add this code is nothing. All right, so Will says nothing.
It will refresh the page, right?
Okay, yeah.
For search.
Where will it navigate to?
Whatever search you put in, right?
Well, I mean, what will the URL be?
The homepage.
Yeah. Anything else?
The homepage, question mark, the search.
Yeah. Yep. So when you have a form that is a GET form and you submit it, it'll take you to whatever action you specify with the field names in the query string parameter list. All right, so that's how it's submitting its data to the server. Let's refresh this. We have tests. This here we have search equals test plus est, right? Now the plus signs, why is that? Because in query string parameters, that's how you have spaces, basically. It's encoded in a query string parameter syntax. So my question now is, what if you add something that confuses the query string parameters? So like if you pass in search here equals ants and test equals another test. What's it gonna look like? So it took all those characters that were unique to query string parameters and it encoded them. So we have %26, which is the encoding for the, what did I search for? Yeah, the and sign. So and search equals pants and test equals on the test. So this is and, this is equals %3D, and then an and here, and then %3D is another equals. Right?
Always %26 and %3.
Yeah, 3D.
3D.
Yeah, so that's important. %3D is the encoded value of an equal sign in a query string parameter list. So in order to retrieve the data from the query string parameter list, then we have to decode what exists there. The browser is going to encode it by default because if you let people just put stuff in a query string like that, then they could like totally ruin the functionality of your website. Because imagine I had this, like imagine these were not encoded. Yeah, they can break your website. It's a bad user experience. And in fact, if you didn't do this, people can hack your website. Because they can make you, like for instance, this gets into data sanitization as well. But if you accept information from one user and you present it to another user as is, then this is the same type of problem. Might be getting ahead of myself here, but basically, when you post data, it needs to be sanitized, like encoded.
So we did this in the search code that we just put into.
Well, we didn't actually do any of this encoding ourselves.
Yeah.
The browser handled that for us.
Okay.
So all we were like was like, hey, we have a form, it posts to this guy. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna put this encoded string as your search parameter, because that's what you put in the field. And by the way, we're going to encode it because that's how we do things. That's how we roll.
Make sure that it encodes it, or just do it back automatically.
Browsers will do it for you. Just you have to know that when you get the results of the search, that if you intended for them to have query string parameters like stuff in there, like equal signs and stuff like that, you need to decode it before you can actually print it out anywhere. If you know that it shouldn't have those things, you just print it out as is. Hi. It's okay. So we have our search input box, right? But notice that when we search for something, it didn't actually do anything. So if I search for FF, you see in our search box, the search is FF, but it didn't filter our results at all, right? So we need to tie that search box up with a query. So we have, actually, the documentation specifies that there is a find by like. So find by first name starting with. So this isn't strictly necessary in this case. We'll do both. Let's do both of them. So you can optionally pass in customized queries into these Hibernate methods. So we have the query annotation. So go back to our game repository. So you have selected G from game G, where d.name like mark 1%.
How would you know to put that in your game repository? Just like another class.
Well, we know that we want to reason about games. We know that we want to get games back and get information about games and return various information about games. So that's because what the data we're interested in is a game, we would go to the game repository to get that information.
Can you go over like what's in that select prompt?
Yeah.
Like,
So this select query in particular is a bit verbose. It has to be like this to format with what, or to follow along with what the JPA library expects, but it still is valid SQL, right? But normally you wouldn't have all this information here. You'd have like select star from game where name like something. Okay. So this is more along the lines of your average SQL query. So this would get everything from the game table where the name column, so the name of the game, begins with anything and ends with en. So that's how you would do that.
so why are you using like there?
Like means where, like, so if we had, alternatively, it would be this, right?
Oh yeah, okay.
Right, so we have name equals %en, so it'd be like Ben, right? So if we want to run a query that's not where the field equals this exactly, if we want to run a query where it begins with something or ends with something, we change this equals to a like, and then we specify like the wildcard operator would be this % sign. But like %en, my name Ben, would get returned by this query because % sign is the beginning of en. And if I had my name were Benjamin, it wouldn't return anything because it doesn't end with en. But if I had en that, right, it's a wildcard on both sides, which is actually a very, very slow SQL query.
Yeah.
And by very, very slow, I mean like maybe a half second, by the way, not like seconds. We're talking.
That's still slow.
It's slow. Yeah, your SQL query should run as quickly as possible. Usually a round trip to the database is what costs you most of your time in a request. And if you have tens of thousands of people hitting your website at the same time, you want to minimize the amount of time you actually make a round trip to the server. That goes into the caching aspect that we talked about yesterday. It's like if you have a frequently retrieved piece of information, go ahead and cache it.
Save it in memory.
Yeah, yep. By default, it's in memory, but there's actually servers dedicated to caching as well. It's a big deal. So just keep in mind, like just store it somewhere that's easy to access.
And how do you cache it again?
Well, it depends. With Hibernate, you don't really need to worry about the caching aspect because it'll handle all that under the scenes for you. But if you wanted to cache your own result set, you'd have to figure out a thing to check before running a query. So like, if you had a class that basically, let's imagine you had like a get games method, right? And in the get games method, you checked a list to see if it had results. So if the list is null, then go to the database to get the list, to get all the results. And then get games will populate that list. So the next time you run get games, it'll check its list to see if there are games. And since you already ran it, those games will exist. So it won't need to go take that round trip to the server again. So you just return the games that you had previously.
So it'll automatically do it?
Yeah, with Hibernate, you don't need to worry about it.
Okay.
But if you wanted to write your own caching type mechanism where you cache something that took a long time for you to do, it would be something like that. But Will, when you write SQL queries, let's go back a little bit. You can name your tables. You can give them aliases within the context of a select statement. So that's what we're doing here. So we said from game G. It says we're selecting a particular game from game with the alias G.
It's almost like an anonymous variable.
It's just not even. It's just an alias.
Okay.
It's like, for the scope of this select statement from now on, we're going to call the game table G so that we don't have to type game over and over again. Right? So then we're like, where the G.name like $1. So this is more like a parameterized query. So check it out. Remember before when we built those prepared statements, we had the question marks? In this, we have to, in the JPA language, it's a little bit different. We have to have the question mark and the position that the parameter passes in as. Yeah. So it's like saying we're going to pass in a parameter, and it's going to come from the first parameter we passed into our method. So we're passing in name into here. So it's going to build a prepared query based off of that. Now keep in mind that we can actually do this exact same thing find by names. This is starting with. Oh, yeah. Yep. So we have find by name starts with and find by name starting with, right? So this was a custom query we created right here, and this is from JPA. They do the same thing. So let's go back to our controller. Well, we probably have some code we need to copy. Well, I guess not. So let's go ahead and just add it for ourselves. So let's put this down here and say else if search is not equal null. And pass in a search here. Game list equals games dot find by name starting with and then search. Okay. So we're starting with the one that we got from JPA, so let's test that first. So search equals F X. Yeah, it went away because it doesn't match that anymore. And FFV, right? Note that it's case sensitive here. It should just ignore case. So if we want to update this to ignore case, we say find by name starting with ignore case. Well, actually, you know what? Let's refactor this so that what we just did was pretty powerful. I just did Shift F6 refactoring of this hibernate method, and it renamed all instances, all usages of this method to that new method name. And now once we reboot, we have access to the new functionality where we have ignoring case searching on that.
How'd you pull that down?
What down?
The case. The right.
What are you talking about?
It just, there was like a little bar on the right that said case just a second ago.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not sure. So like search equals, yeah. Cool. So let's use our custom query now. Find by name starts with instead of find by name starting with, just so we can see it in action and confirm that it works the way we expect. Replace our call to find by name starts with. And remember, we're not using the automatic code generation tool that JPA gives us now. We're passing in a query that we want it to generate or to run ourselves. It still does all the handling of all that stuff though, so it's still pretty awesome. But it's the same search parameter. We have F. Yeah, looks like it still works. Yeah. Good. So this saves you a lot, right? You basically aren't telling the system at all how to get to the data. You don't have to write any code that's like, give me the data, it's here, retrieve it from SQL and parse it back into an object, blah, blah, blah. You're like, we store data as games. Give me all the games, system. And it's like, okay, here's all your games, bro. End of story. Sound cool? Everything gelling so far? Make sense? All right. It's 10:50. I think it's a good time to probably take a break. Let's plan on being back at 11 o'clock and we can finish out today's lecture. Okay? Sound good? All right, I'm gonna get some coffee. Stretch my legs.
Kinda, yeah, thanks.
Next time you brew coffee, do not brew your stuff. No promises. Speaking of hair and stuff, my favorite thing is when people try to do this 9 years, they make food and they have like your hair. Yeah, they have the ear velvet, but not the hair net for their hair. The whole face is coming out of nets. So I think this is pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah, I think honestly it's the coolest thing we've done so far. Really.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
Does this surpasses the Java libgdx stuff?
Yeah, for me.
Really? Nice.
You guys my roommate cut her hair in my dog's water bowl, right?
Like, did she stand over the bowl?
I cut it. Like it was like perfectly cut. I was like, what the heck did you do? And I was like, Chloe, don't drink that. Weird.
Did she have like beef with you or the dog?
No, she's just like weird. She was like super competitive too. Anytime we go out together, if a guy like talked to me, she would leave her number for him. It was so weird.
So she didn't think it was a weird coincidence that the day after she cut her hair into your dog's water bowl that you were like, I think that we're
It wasn't just that. There were like several instances where it just like all added up, and then that was like the final straw.
Well, I mean, what I'm asking, I get your perspective. I'm wondering what her perspective is.
She asked me if it was because she asked me to do the dishes, and I was like, no, it's not because you're asking me to do the dishes. I'm like, it's because you're a freak, and I'm like, you're gonna kill me.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's a valid reason.
Like, that was delicious. Thank you.
So anybody watch any football over the weekend?
I
Yeah,
watched the US Open last night.
that's not football.
That's kind of-
But I love the US Open though.
Yep.
I really wanted to stay up for the FSU game.
Oh my God, you should have.
Yeah, I know.
Who won?
I read about it.
FSU.
I was like, oh man.
FSU did.
Yeah. What was the score when you went to bed? Or when you stopped
They
watching?
were down like 28-6 at halftime.
Yeah, it was. I think they got up to 13 at halftime. They scored just before halftime.
Okay, something like
But yeah, it was not. It was nasty. It was a bad game.
that. Yeah, I watched football all weekend, and I've just gotten back from flying back from Atlantic City and everything. It's like that. Just can't stand it.
Oh sure.
Yeah, Avery had a fun weekend.
Did you you know Chad Kelly, right?
Yeah.
He used to be a Clemson quarterback.
Mike Kelly.
Yeah. He had that rap, right? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Oh my God, that dude is so cool. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, this.
I will root against him at any opportunity, but so like I also really dislike FSU, but they're really good. But we beat them, then it makes us better.
Oh yeah. Dude, that game was like I understand a lot of my Clemson friends feel the same way, like they hate FSU. But I just dislike Chad Kelly so much that every time I saw like a sideline shot of him like staring off into the distance, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
yes.
So it's weird because you want all ACC teams to win so that we can win against them. And
Yeah.
makes it all look
Go away, John.
Why is he not lunch, Ben?
He works.
Back live here.
Yeah. He works with my old company, like literally a block that way.
Okay.
And we've been next to each other for like a few months now and have never gotten lunch. So.
He doesn't work for Raymond, does he?
No, he works for Hedgehog Development,
Okay.
where I got him a job and then left. Anyway, football. Dude, there was some really fantastic games. Like that Texas game. Did you watch that?
parts of it we were in a casino. They try to like keep you away from all outside stimulation.
Oh, right. It's like your
Yeah,
whole
so
world
it's-
is now casino.
Yeah. But all Saturday we watched football. That Boston College game was on at like 9 a.m. So
Mhm.
we were watching all the way through Clemson at like 1 a.m.
Nice. Yeah. And then our team freaking. Actually, it was surprising. I can't tell if it was our defense stepped up or if Auburn is just terrible. I'm not
It is
sure. Yeah, we won 19-13. And with an inexplicable. You know what? Do you know that we didn't cover the spread because we didn't go for that field goal?
Yeah, we were pulling our hair out.
Yeah.
It was like, why is this?
Yeah.
This game could have been over.
Yeah. That was like, yeah, well, if they go down the field in 40 seconds, then they'll go and shake their hand or whatever. And I'm like, that's kind of bullshit excuse, Donna. Sorry, I know you're head ball coach, but kind of sucks. You know, he donated $1 million to IFTE yesterday.
Really?
He and his wife, yeah. So people were thinking that it's kind of a strange coincidence that he made a call that resulted in not covering the spread and then immediately donated $1 million. Like maybe he had a vested interest in not kicking that field goal. Who knows? Yeah. All right. It's 4 minutes till 11. You gonna get back to work? Or do you want to chill out some more? All right, who else can go to that? Dude, Chad Kelly, man. Just his sadness just fills me with happiness. Because he's so full of himself. He got dismissed from the Clemson football team for just being a jerk, like a disrespectful butthole. Like he just wouldn't respect anybody. So like, okay, well you have to leave now because we have this guy called Deshaun Watson who we is also pretty good.
He's okay.
But I'm not. I don't know. It's too early to tell, really, what's the state of our offense.
Yeah, well, so Mike Williams is doing big things.
Yes.
The only thing that seemed to be working was throwing sideline Mike Williams.
I know, it's like
And
whenever
it's
we-
like, why don't we just keep doing that?
Yeah.
Just kept running up the middle for 2 yards.
Yeah. Well, in order for Mike Williams pass to be successful, you have to set up and run a little bit.
Yeah, but it was like critical plays. We're going up the middle for 2 yards.
Yeah. That's true. Speaking of that, Texas did that.
Yeah, so I didn't really catch much of that game. I was getting score updates.
They had
That's
two,
another one I wish I had seen.
Texas has two quarterbacks. They have a freshman who can throw the ball, and they have a senior who is like 250 pounds and is like a battering ram. Like he just like they bring in swoops when they need like 3 yards, and he gets them 3 yards, and that won them the game.
Yeah.
Like swoops would. It was actually a big deal because Swoops was like beat out by this freshman in camp for the starting position, so he could easily be like super upset about it, but instead he just does what he can to help out the team. And his role is to get like yardage, like basically running back. So it adds a lot of dynamic stuff to their team, which makes them actually pretty scary. They actually jumped from unranked to ranked 11.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. We're lucky to keep our second place rank, honestly.
Yeah, I didn't think that we would.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Because like Michigan and Ohio State, they both dropped 70 points in their opponents.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more impressive stuff going on last week.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I'm going down to Troy this week.
Oh, really? Nice, man. I like going on all sorts of trips. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Where's Atlantic City?
New Jersey. It's
Really?
so the reason we went there is because my family has a house that sleeps like 15 people. And it's like 45 minutes from Atlantic City.
Oh, wow.
So rather than like fly to Vegas and get hotel rooms and stuff, just did that, and we also like go to the beach.
That sounds really cool.
It's more relaxing than like just fly straight to the casino.
Yeah. Is Atlantic City where that HBO show took place?
Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. So my friends were leaving the casino the first night we were there at like 4:30 in the morning, and like I got them at like midnight.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Can't even.
I'm not a big gambler, so it's like I'll lose 50 bucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, they left at like 4:30, and like minutes before, it was like national news. The cop got shot right outside of Caesar's Palace. And that's like where our car was parked. It's like really not great
Wow.
area. Yeah.
So
So there were like bodies in the street, kicked off.
that is crazy. That would be really shocking.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I like to think that like I would be able to keep my cool if like someone were like really badly injured. Like, because I've seen like the result. Like I've seen like when like terrorist attacks happen, you see things like you see like people get shot and you see like blood and people's limbs and stuff like that doing weird stuff. But like the difference between that and like it existing in real life has got to be like a night and day. Like I don't even know. Like I remember I was there for the birth of both of my daughters, and that was that was enough of that. So I can't imagine like seeing someone getting shot in the streets. It'd be total craziness. Okay, good talk, guys.
Great ending point.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back to programming where nobody gets shot. All right. So, let's see. First of all, we don't have a concept of a user yet. So what we want to do next is add a way to log into the app and then only show you the games that the current user submitted, right? So if we want to show games for a current user, and then we need to have users, right? We have games already. We need to have users. So let's make a user entity. It's not the right folder, Ben. So we have user, new class. Okay. So let's compare this with game real quick. So it's basically the same thing. We do have a constructor for game that we don't have for user. That's fine. And we have here, this is a unique constraint. So like in this column, that's going to say that these values have to be unique. So you can't have two users with the same name. If you try to insert two users with the same name, Hibernate's going to throw an exception. So when you call users.save, like if you have a users repository and you call users.save on an object that exists already, then it's going to be like, sorry, brozef, no can do. Actually, it's not going to be that chill about it. It's going to throw an exception and ruin everything. So this is a key constraint. It's a constraint. In SQL, you can add constraints to your columns where they can only have specific qualities. In this case, the quality is uniqueness. We look at the other things for column. We have name, unique, nullable, insertable, updatable, all sorts of stuff. So we have length. I don't know why, like, what's up with this? Freaking IronYard chat. I think it was an article they linked about how beef is good for you. Or whatever. They get into some crazy stuff in the IronYard chat. Okay, so we have all sorts of different useful things that you can use with your column annotation, like the precision for a decimal point. It's cool. Stuff like that. Okay. So we have a user class. It's an entity in Hibernate's world. It's going to be stored in this users table. This annotation is not always required, except for when we're talking about the user class. So it has to be specified if it's user class. So we have ID, which is the primary key of this table, and it's an ID column. It's a generated value, so we're not going to tell the database what the ID is going to be. The database is in control of that. So this column is called name. It's not nullable, which means you have to have a value. It must be unique with respect to the rest of the elements in the table. And then we have a password column that is not nullable. So you have to have a username and a password, and the username has to be unique, right? So that's our entity. So let's refresh. Let's rerun our application. We don't. In fact, the only reason why we probably have that there is because we're going to add another constructor later. Yeah.
So we're gonna need the constructor for name and password.
Possibly.
I was wondering why we don't have one.
It is weird that we don't have one, and I'm glad that you think that's weird. I'm going to connect to Game Tracker and then do /DT. Now we have games and users. Yay! Select star from games. We have, I love ASCII tables, by the way, it's my favorite. I had a professor at Clemson who used to write all of his notes in just plain text files, and they were like, well, he used all these ASCII graphs and stuff like that. He was the bomb. Anyway, so you can see the data here. We have no user data, so 0 rows, but we have the table, right? Cool. So we go back to our lesson for today. We have our user entity. So just some notes. So we have unique equals true to the username, just additional default. Also keep in mind name users is important. By default, Hibernate uses the class name as the table name, which makes the table name user. This is actually a special keyword in Postgres. So you get a cryptic error message if you don't rename it to users like we did, right? So Postgres uses the name user, and you can't use the table name user in Postgres. So that's the reason why. Yep. So let's add a login and a logout to home.html, right? So this should look familiar. By now, we've done this about 300 bajillion times. By the way, if you hit Command-O, you can navigate between types here, like class names, like game. If you do Command-Shift-O, you can navigate to files. So if I do .html, this pulls up, I hit enter, I'm there. Right? A pretty baller way to go about things. It's like, you can look like a super big badass because you're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna navigate around real fast and like go to everywhere real quick. So can someone tell me what this says?
And if user's false.
Not if user is false.
User is true. User is null.
Yes. If user is falsy.
Okay.
Yes. So user could be false, but also null would be a falsy value. So falsy is a weird word, and I encourage you not to say it too much or it's going to start sounding really strange really quickly. Is when in Mustache a value, when converted to a Boolean, is either true or false. So in 99% of the use cases, so like for instance, like null and false are the only real falsy values in Mustache. Or like empty string is also a falsy value. So you have empty string, null, and false. So if user were null, then it would do that. And then we have another block here that's explicitly saying if the user exists, do this, right? So basically I wrapped all this HTML right here in this guy. So we don't want them to be able to log out or to do any of this nifty searching stuff or to be able to add a game unless they're logged in. So you kind of see what the overall structure is there. So we're going to list the games regardless. Well, actually, no, that doesn't even make any sense either because we're doing it per person now. So let's just get rid of that. Basically, now all the UI is inside of a if you're logged in statement. Keep in mind that in a more complicated example or in the real world, instead of just rendering the login or the body of the page, the controller would detect that you're not logged in and then would redirect you to the login page appropriately, right? So that's how it would normally work. But in this case, it's pretty simplistic. We're just going to either render the login or the user stuff. Do you see what I'm trying to say there? Like if you go to your Facebook page, for instance, and you're not logged in, it's going to show you the login page. That's not a good example because that's still facebook.com, but like if you try to log in, like if you log into your bank, you copy the URL and you log out, you hit the URL again, your session has been invalidated because you logged out. You try to hit the URL again, it's going to be like, your session doesn't exist anymore, boss, so we're going to redirect you to the login page. Yeah. So that's normally what would happen. But in this case, we're just saying, sometimes we're going to render the login page, other times we're going to render the user content. Cool? All right, so login. It's a post request. So this form is going to post to /login. We have text and password, and we have a submit button, right? Pretty old hat by now. Now, I really want to discuss an older web technology called web forms. It's from Microsoft, and it has to do with forms. And now that you have a firm concept of forms, then I think it's going to make a lot of sense to you, but it doesn't necessarily belong in lecture. So if you guys are interested in hearing this thing that I have to talk about, that I really want to talk about, then come to me and we can talk about it. Basically, the gist of it is that Microsoft wrapped every page in a form. Every single page you see is one giant form.
I was wondering why we didn't do it that way.
Because reasons. The problem with form is that you can't have a form inside of a form. So if you wrap your entire body in a form, the biggest reason why that's a problem is because that you could no longer have forms that you accept data. You could still do it, but it breaks the HTML specification, right? It's also just a really hacky way to do things. So like the reason why, okay, can't talk about that.
Okay, all right.
This is way too technical, even though it's really interesting to me. I can't, it's too much for now, all right? So, so we have a login here, text and password, right? But keep in mind that we don't have, because you guys, I think up until now, we've used input type equals text for our passwords. There is an input type equals password that still submits your data as text when you submit the button, but when you type it in, instead of showing your password, it's dots to everyone else. Like when you look, like when you're on a page, so fancy. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so now we have a user entity, but we have no users repository. So let's make that. So it's a CRUD repository. So we're extending CRUD, and we have a find by first name method here. So let's add that here. Oh, I don't know if I'm ever gonna not make sound effects whenever I do stuff.
I was thinking about that all weekend. I was like, God, I'm so brutal.
Just kind of happens. We have public interface, user repository, extends CRUD repository. Remember that CRUD repository takes in two types. The first one is the thing that you're storing. The second one is the type that we're using as our identity column, right? And we have one method is find first by name. So we're going to pass in a username here. It's going to find us the first user that matches that string that we pass in. Because if we just had find by name, it would give you a list of users. So we're saying find first by name. That's a good point, is that on the users table, they have to be unique. So it's functionally the same thing. But this is a more concise way of doing it, because even if our column constraint specifies that it's going to be 1, I don't think that Hibernate's smart enough to return us only 1 because we have that constraint specified. A very astute observation there, Mike. Yeah. Yes, if the usernames were not unique, we could not write a method that gives us one user by a username, right? Because at that point, there'd be no way to pick. We had to find a way to pick something. So yeah, it would be like, we have to have something to search on. So it's, you have to like give the system more information as to which person you wanted to pick. Because like obviously their name wasn't enough to uniquely identify them. Like it could be email address. So a lot of the times when I build systems, email address is my username key. It's like a primary key is the email address. Because you can have people with the same usernames even, or the same names, the same everything. But really, if you're not me, you don't have my email address. So it's a pretty great candidate for a primary key in a user's table. Right. Because a lot of the web is predicated on the fact that you own the email address that you say you own. Right. And if someone else has access, that's a problem. So it's a good thing. But everyone else can have your same email or same name. And you could also use like social security number. But you probably won't find many people to register for your website if you ask for a social security number.
Yeah.
Roughly,
No.
roughly 0 people.
Let's hope 0 people.
Yeah. Well,
Put your social security for like a government website.
Yeah.
It looks like it was made 30 years ago.
yes.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah, and then you hear like, because my daughters, I got free credit reporting, free like credit check stuff for like 3 years because in South Carolina, someone stole the social security numbers of newborn children or something like that, and like was like signing them up for credit cards and stuff. So
The company I used to work for, they do background checks, and so they check your social security number. And the company that did background checks, one of their guys like left his laptop in his car. Somebody stole the laptop and my security number. My social security number was one of the ones that was like stolen.
nice.
Luckily, there's no like fraudulent activity.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10, at the very least, there's the last cover your ass policy that typically is instituted by corporations is hard drive encryption. So like I know for many of the jobs that I've had in the past, if someone steals my laptop and they don't know my password, they're not getting any of my data. The entire hard drive is encrypted. And that's, so I like working for banks and insurance companies and like really high profile companies, they require us to have encrypted hard drives because if you have access to their internal systems through your laptop and it's unencrypted and someone steals it, then that's a liability.
Yeah,
So
that's probably what happened then.
yeah, so they probably just knew that like he was browsing like a bunch of like maybe he had recently worked on like a huge batch of social security numbers, and since your name was in that batch, then you were flagged. But like it's not indicative of anyone actually doing anything in your social security number. It's like, okay, this many people could have possibly been affected. Probably not because we encrypted our hard drive, but just in case.
Let's let them know.
Yeah. Good talk. So computer security is a big, big, big topic, and we have a guy coming in, I don't know what week, but I think it's soon. It's either this week or next week. His name is Preem. We talked about him before. He is a badass. And he's going to talk about computer security with us. And last cohort, it was the most intriguing lecture. In fact, Avery, he has the Project Euler. He has a website where instead of being Project Euler-based questions, it's hack this website related questions. So it's like a series of problems, very similar to Project Euler, but it's like invade the website.
I was wondering how people like that get started.
Yeah.
It's like a very specific intelligence to know how to like hack stuff.
Yeah. You have to like,
It's not something you learn at school. It's not like
no.
Yeah.
available in a lot of ways. Like I just figured like back corners of the web, where do you find training or something?
You really, it's all about like skills in reverse engineering. And that's a very difficult thing to teach is reverse engineering. You basically just have to be You have to guess.
To know it frontwards.
Yeah. I mean, if you're capable of reverse engineering a system to the point where you can hack it, I mean, you've got a pretty firm mastery on everything.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is probably one of the most interesting, I think, topics like in the world.
Well, it's hard. There's no real secure website, by the way. So like there is just probabilities of them being hacked, and that varies from like 1% to 99%, right? And it's a constant battle between like white hat hackers and black hat hackers to like secure the systems and to compromise systems. So there's no single system that's connected to the internet that's completely invulnerable from any attack.
That's what I was thinking, because like the same people that are hackers are like just as smart as the people that are making the security system. So
Yeah.
it's like there's always gonna be.
It's an ongoing battle. It's like good versus evil.
Doesn't that FBI now hire like hackers to help them?
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
hire the criminals to help them.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There was a former hacker, his name was Kevin Mitnick. This was not the topic of today's lecture, but it's also awesome, so I'm okay with it. One of the biggest weaknesses in your system, this is a thing, by the way, if you want to like remember this or write this down. The biggest security risk in your system is the people using your system, like 9 times out of 10. So Kevin Mitnick specialized in a method of hacking called social engineering. So what he would do is call up people and then pretend to be their boss or pretend to be someone higher up in the organization and rely on their naivety to get information from them, like the phone number for the modem that was sitting next to them. Or like,
No.
yeah. Be like, I got this big account, I got to get done, and I lost connection. I need to know, like, blah, 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 technical terms. Just give me this information. I'm a guy. So you gain credibility, and then you can, once you have credibility, you can ask for information. Actually, I had a graduate class on cybersecurity where my professor, he just walked around Clemson and went to all the HR buildings and stuff like that, and he just kept an eye out on all the monitors for usernames and passwords that were listed there. And he got credit card information, expense accounts for Clemson University, where it's the numbers and the expiration and the freaking security code, where it's a sticky note on the freaking monitors and stuff like that. I mean, and password for user accounts, social media, stuff like that. It's all people write these things down and don't realize that that's a vulnerability. Yeah.
But the other side of that is how will you remember it?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you have to have security systems in place to help.
Yeah, there's gotta be a better way than that, but still.
So much for a password.
No, I mean, it seems like it makes sense to not have that stuff visible, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
So the average person is completely ignorant of that kind of thing, and so they just, it's for them, passwords are an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Interesting.
super fascinating.
So-
Yeah.
So bring it back to this. Why do we use CRUD repository instead of JPA? Everything I've seen online is JPA.
Well, let's look at it. So JPA repository implements CRUD repository,
Okay.
and it looks like it's got,
It's just got some built-in stuff.
yeah. So there's batch operations you can use for JPA repository, and yeah.
Okay.
But it also extends paging and sorting. It extends paging and sorting repository. So it basically is the top level. I don't think anything implements this in Hibernate anyway. So is it simple JPA repository you've seen?
Or no.
It's just JPA repository?
Yeah.
Okay. So you see here, it has all these methods that overrode from its basic base types. We have flush here, and then save and flush, and delete and batch, and get one, which are not overrides. So it allows you to do batch operations. It just allows for greater functionality. But it's essentially the same thing. So JPA repository extends paging and sorting extends CRUD. So we're just at a lower level where we're just interested in finding and reading, updating, deleting. Yep. Rock on. Okay, so we have a user model and we have a user repository. And in our user repository, we've utilized the JPA query generation utility to define a method that finds the first user by a username. And we know from our astute observations that if we query by username at all, we're getting 1, right? Because only one person can exist with a specific name. So here's where our dependency injection comes into play again. We have a game repository before, and now we have a user repository. Let's close all this. So up here we have 2 fields now. We have our games repository, it's auto-wired, and we have our users repository that's also auto-wired. Remember that adding this auto-wired annotation means that Spring will give us an instance of a user repository, which is an anonymous class. Because remember, user repository is not a class, it's an interface. So if we didn't have auto-wired here, then at runtime this would not have any, this should be null out of our request mappings. So I have to specify that. Auto-wired. Cool. So we're going to add some request mappings here, log in and log out, copy this, and then take a look at it. So we have homepage and add game so far. Let's add log in and log out. Check it out. So we're assuming this constructor exists, but it doesn't exist yet. So we're going to add a constructor that's based off of name and password, and then magically that goes away, right? We have user dot. Oh, that's true. You guys are on point. We have get ID, get set ID, get name, and get password, set password. Let's undo that. So that's all working now. Okay. So for login, we're posting this data to the server. We need to interact with session. So we just add session, okay? And we have string username and string password, and it throws exception. So in the event that it's an invalid password, we're gonna throw an exception here, right? So we're saying user equals users.find by first name username. So we're going to try and look up the current user by their name. One sec. I think I have a. Or is it 12:30? Okay. So I've got a lunch interview with somebody. So I just want to make sure that we had enough time to wrap up lecture and for me to go to that thing. It's at 12:30, so we have plenty of time. Cool. All right. So when we log in, so if we find by first name and the user that the database returns is null, that means there is no entry in the users table with that username, right? So we're going to make it. So we have user. We're going to say that user equal to a new user object, username and password, and then we're going to save user. We're going to say, hey, users repository, save this user object that we just created. Otherwise, so keep in mind that this is, if we're here and we're executing this, it means that the user is not null, so there exists a user, and it'll check this expression that says, if the password we entered is not the same as the current user's password, then throw this exception. So if we found a user but they put in the wrong password, then we're going to do this, right? And if we're here, we know that it's a valid user, and we're going to set the username, this current session's username equal to username. Okay. And then here we have this string that we're returning, and remember this is a special Spring format that indicates that we're going to redirect. So when it sees a string of this type, we're going to redirect to this path being /, which will take us back to the home page. Okay? So that's login. And then logout is much simpler. It's another post request. So it's a post request because we're modifying data on the server. We're like, hey, post this logout information. It's like we're logging out, so we want to change the data on the server about my status of being logged in or logged out, so post. Okay. And then we need access to session to invalidate our session, and then we just say session not invalidate, and we redirect. Pretty straightforward, right? We're going to ditch our current username and then move on. Here's the fun part. We have two entities. We have game and we have user. And what we want to say is that the games belong to user. In SQL terms, we have a many-to-one relationship with user. All right? So if we go to game, we add this many-to-one annotation here. We can give it a user field. So if we look at the many-to-one annotation, it says, defines a single valued association to another entity class that has a many-to-one multiplicity. It is not normally necessary to specify the target entity explicitly, since it can be usually inferred from the type of the object being referenced. If the relationship is bidirectional, the non-owning one-to-many entity side must use the match by element to specify the relationship field or property of the entity that is the owner of the relationship. So that is kind of verbose. And so that's the downside to reading Java docs, is they tell you exactly everything there is to know about this stuff. But essentially, what this says is that there are many games for one user. One user can have many games. There's a many-to-one relationship between games and users.
And you have to add that to your code. 10 minutes to 1.
Yes. Because if you don't have that annotation here, because user is like, it's not going to be a direct column in your database. Let's see how it is. It affects our schema.
Okay.
So we save this. So we mentioned how it affects your schema here. It says the many-to-one annotation causes this table to add a foreign key in the database called user_ID for the purpose of doing joins. Do you remember how we did joins before? On one table we had a user ID column, and the other table we had our users table, right? So the user ID column in the games table will match up with the ID column in the users table. So Hibernate will do that join for us automatically. And if we didn't have this annotation here, we could have a column that's like int user ID or something like that, right? Available equals false, and then let's see, get key, no. I'm not even sure how you go about this, but basically you could accomplish a similar goal by specifying that there's a user ID column on this. But actually there's probably a foreign key, yeah, to the equals users. Huh. Oh, you know what? Maybe, whatever. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We're kind of running short of time. But essentially, this many-to-one annotation sets up, it tells Hibernate that we need to add basically a user ID column to the games table to specify the user that owns the game.
To join it together.
Yeah. So when you do an inner join, it'll map up that game with that user. Okay. So let's update our home request here. Let's go back to our controller and slash. Here is search, just because. So in our home now, we're saying username is equal to session that get attribute username. So we're getting the current user's username. And then we're going to find that user in the database. And if the user is not null, we're going to add to our model that user. We're going to add game list to our model. The value of game list is going to be games.find by genre. Well, we need to modify this shortly. So when we add a game, you need to specify the user that owns the game. So let's update our add game endpoint to do so. So right now we're just saving the name, game, platform, genre, and year. So we need to, first of all, add a constructor that accepts users. So let's add another constructor here that accepts users. We're done with that. And then we get our current username by asking the session what the username is. We get the user object. But we're back, so that's okay. It's just my camera started showing my face again instead of the screen. So I think the reason why this was hanging was because Maven was requesting the dependencies from a server and my internet crashed.
Oh,
And so it took forever it was like Maven was like waiting for its response before it could do anything. And then,
that's almost like a nice alarm, like, like, well, I can't perform this unless this is done.
yeah, I mean, it's like it can't do its job until it gets stuff back from the internet. So it was just waiting. Right.
Do you try it yet?
Have I tried it?
Yeah.
No. Have you tried it?
Yes.
It doesn't work right?
I got a null value in the column green.
Name, test.
Actually.
We do have a problem though. It's that we're still returning all games, no matter who owns them.
And that was supposed to not do that.
Correct. So we need to update our game repository. So find by genre and user. Try that. No. Do.
Okay.
Let's do list game find all by user. User. We expect this to work. Okay. Let's go back to our game controller and then let's get rid of this. For simplicity, no, I'll keep all that functionality. Let's get rid of it for now. Games.find all by user. Okay. And let's just do this. All right, let's rerun this. User, we refreshed, it has no dudes. Let's add some. Battletoads. Genre is shooter. Platform is Atari. Police year is like 1981. That game. So this user has Battletoads. We'll log out, log in as Benjamin. Now I have test Wii U.
Oh,
So all the other ones that don't have valid users, because we added a user ID column, so that their user ID is going to be null. So since we're pulling all the ones where the ID matches with the current user ID, it's going to be null. So if we look at our data here, select star from games, we can see here we have user ID is now a column. And so these last two have different user IDs. So it's just select star from users. Really, that's the password I decided to use when I saved it in Chrome. So, yeah. So the ID for this user is 4. This one's for 6. So it only pulls back this one for when I'm logged in as Benjamin, and then this one when I'm logged in as user. I'm gonna take a screenshot of this. Is it Command Alt 4?
That one pulls up the history, like drag a box over it and takes a picture.
Yeah, but there's one that's like Command Alt 3. I did that. It didn't make any noise. It saves it on the desktop. It did save it. Okay. All right. So The last step here is basically saying that if you want to initialize your data with something, like if you want to initialize your database with some data, you can do it with a post construct annotation. So in our controller, is this post construct annotation. If we take a look at post construct, it says post construct annotation is used on a method that needs to be executed after dependency injection is done to perform any initialization, right? So basically, when you build this controller object, when Spring gives us our dependency injected fields, it's going to run this init method for post construct. We can call this anything. We can call it anything, literally, right? And then it doesn't matter. It's just anything. It's going to grab anything that's marked as post construct and run it after initialization happens. After this runs, it's going to say, well, if there are no users, then we're going to make a new user, give it name Zach, password hunter2, and then save user. So for those of you who are curious, Zach is the original owner of this class. Not like Charlotte, but like we have a curriculum that we all pull from. So yeah, he wrote it. So that's why sometimes you'll see Zach's name all over the place. If you've seen it before, it's because he's the curriculum lead for Java. Yep, so basically this says if there are no users in the user repository, make one and save it. It's good. And that's it for today. Any questions? So we're getting into a territory where if you do something slightly wrong, you're going to get some pretty cryptic error messages in Spring. Because like if you have the wrong parameter name, keep in mind that if you get an error in your stack trace that doesn't make sense, like on application startup, you'll frequently see these problems. Just double check your syntax for these Hibernate query methods. That's the biggest thing. And make sure the names of your fields and your models map up to the query methods. Because like if you have a typo between one of those, like if you have weird casing or something like that, it could really throw it off. So just be on the lookout for that when you do your homework. Cool?
Did you also comment out the model add attribute, the game track control?
Nope, those should all be there. So yeah. So model add attribute game, so the game list, and then model add attribute user.
So how's it,
That's weird.
Actually, you know what? User. Instead of doing this, I'm going to do this. See, this works the same way. Here's not. So let's check out the data. Interesting. Data. Okay. we go. Oh, that broke everything. Oh, because there is no default user. Really? So one too many, we have many, two. Many, two, one. Hmm. All right, I need to look into this, but for now I need to bail out of what I'm trying to do and give you guys your homework assignment. So what I wanted to do was get at the games in a different way. I need to update my repositories to, or my models rather, my entities to do that. So I'll fix that over lunch and then get back to you guys. But for now, I'm going to focus on getting out your homework assignment. So I'm all done with lecture for today. So yet again, my adoring fans, I'll see you when I get home.